Can we start? Sir, shall we start? Sir, you're muted. Sir, you're muted.
Yeah, I got it. So you can hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You want to start or you want to wait 2 or 3 more minutes?
As you say, we can start, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I request all of you to be seated. And good afternoon. And on behalf of Sundri College for Women and the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Amritjit Singh, Langston Hughes Professor Emeritus of English and African American Studies, Ohio University, USA, who has joined us from London this afternoon. And it's very early there, sir. So I know it's, thank you so much. And we are extremely honored and fortunate to have you in our midst today. And I would like to thank you for sparing your valuable time and being a part of this conference. I also know that you have been traveling, and despite that, you have managed to take time out for us. And I also extend a very warm welcome to Madam Principal, who is also here, and the audience who are waiting to. So now I invite Madam Principal to say a few words.
A very good afternoon to you, because in India it is afternoon. And
yes, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been hearing about you, and hearing from you officially.
So it is a pleasure that you have joined us. Yeah. And I really appreciate that you have taken out your valuable time, and we'll benefit from your views. And as such, I think so. Yeah, of course. There are a lot of audience here, and we are also going live. So where your ideas will benefit very many people. That's what I believe. And the topic for today is very interesting. That is memory, truth, and reconciliation, partition in private and public spaces. As such, I found this topic very interesting, because in my opinion, the public space in India was already an amalgamation of Hindu and Muslim. And already the Turks who came to India in the 11th century and ruled as in the slave dynasty, they were initially Turks, but when they became kings, they lost all their sense of independence or identity, and they actually mingled with the Indian populace, and a new kind of a culture, a sense of new sense of architecture, and all these things came into existence. So this is a totally new concept, because even the language was affected, where we had Hindi flame during the medieval period also. So these public spaces, always what I meant is that it was a mix, and when of Islamic features as well as Hindu features, and we survived in this and we lived by it. But suddenly with partition, with a stroke of partition, with a partition acts, these public spaces were defined in a different manner. So how strange it is that through centuries, we lived together and we influenced each other. But suddenly in that space, there was a lot of, you can say, we didn't believe in each other. We were suspicious of each other and so on. So, and that harmony which existed, that harmony suddenly was lost. So this partition, I suppose, redefined the public spaces and also the private spaces, because in the private spaces also a lot of customs intermingled, and new type of customs came into existence as far as the Hindus or Sikhs or Muslims were there. And but still harmony was there despite the differences. But suddenly we became gross enemy of each other. So that introspection, that why we changed ourselves in the public and private spaces, because of course it was a political decision, I agree. But despite this political decision, why people changed, why people became gross enemies of each other, and why these harmonious spaces became a place where enmity and animosity prevailed. So these are all questions which we have to dwell upon, and we have to think. And the more problematic stance is that this kind of enmity still is there. Although when we go and meet people with a people-to-people relation is very fine. We go to Pakistan, they welcome us. We also welcome them. They are also very curious and they also want to have our visas. Sometimes they are denied with the visas and sometimes we are not granted. So these are all, of course, maybe some other decisions, but people at large have a kind of a similarity because they speak very good Punjabi and, it is a really treat.
I just came back, so I can tell you that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, and they really welcome you with your open arms. But why, again, that sense of, again, enmity is there or bitterness is there, but we are continuing these kind of things even in today. That is the most, that is, I think, most painful thing, because some kind of harm which is done to the, maybe those religious places there or religious places here or some other episodes similar in the similar vein. So these are all problems where these things are continuing. So you are the best person to elaborate that why these things are happening yet.
I'll do my best. Yeah.
And why?
Thank you very much.
Go away with it. So thank you very much. And once again, I welcome you, sir. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you, Dr. Harpreet Kaur. And I want to thank you, Manisha, for your kind introduction. And Harvinder has been tirelessly in touch with me.
Yes, sir.
He won't give up. Gurpreet, Hema, everybody has been helping. So,
may I just introduce you to the audience, sir, please?
Okay, I thought you were done.
Yeah. No.
No, you have a little more.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't mind being
Professor Singh
I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, I mean, apart from being a very warm and a lovely human being, he is the Langston Hughes Professor Emeritus of English and African American Studies at Ohio University. Currently, he is a visiting fellow at South Asia Institute, University of Texas, Austin. A past president of Mellis and Seller, he received the Mellis Lifetime Achievement Award in 2007 and the Seller Distinguished Achievement Award in Scholarship in January 2014. He has held research fellowships at Yale, Harvard, and served as visiting professor at Wesleyan University, New York University, University of California at Berkeley. He's deeply interested in pedagogical approaches that combine history and literature, and he's widely published in South African American, South Asian, post-colonial migration and immigration studies. He has been a Fulbright scholar at university in Berlin, Germany, Graz, Austria, Alexandria, Egypt, to name a few. He's a prolific writer as well and an academician. And his books include the novels of the Harlem Renaissance, Memory, Narrative, and Identity, Conversations with Ralph Ellison, Post-Colonial Theory and the United States, the collected writings of Wallace Thurman, and Revisiting India's Partition, Essays on Culture, Memory, and Politics, and Critical Perspectives on Chitra Devakaruni, Feminism, and Diaspora. And today he's going to be talking on memory, truth, and reconciliation, partition in public and private spaces. So I hand over the platform to you now, sir.
Thank you very much, Manisha, once again. And it's a pleasure to be with you and your audience. If any of you have read, many of you must have read the synopsis I gave. Just 1 minute. Yeah. A couple of pages fell down. That's what happened. You know what I would like to address. I appreciate the remarks by Dr. Harpreet Kaur, and actually they are very helpful because I was definitely planning to address some of those issues. I have promised as a professor of literature to comment on at least two writers, Bhisham Sani and Intezar Hussain. So Dr. Harpreet Kaur is right, to a large extent. But the fact is that these narratives of hybridity, the narratives of mixtures, the narratives of shared cultures were around for a long time. So were indications of fissures in our social and political realities. The development of, for example, Muslim identity goes back to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in Aligarh. It goes back into the 19th century. But I think we are right that the petition was a bombshell of a kind, which disturbed the delicately held relationships and communication modes. But we have had some other studies since then, particularly you have Urvashi Vaid coming to you as the closing speaker, I believe. Now, she did this book, The Other Side of Silence, in 2000. And this is what she says. She says, it took the events of 1984 to make me understand how ever-present partition was in our lives too, to recognize that it could not easily be put away inside the covers of a history books. I could no longer pretend that this was a history that belonged to another time, to someone else. So we have, and then of course there are things that have become part of the culture today. So yes, something happened in 1947, and it was a major concern, and I will talk a fair amount it. But Urvashi is right that she did not think of the damage that the partition did until what happened to the Sikhs in Delhi and in other places in 1984, after what happened first in Amritsar in June 1984, and then again what happened after Mrs. Gandhi's assassination by her Sikh bodyguards. So, and for me, these are points that they're all South Asian. They're not points Indian. So in my narrative, you have to include 1971 too, when there was an election in 1970, and Mujibur Rahman of East Pakistan won the majority of vote, and the politicians on the West Pakistan side, they wanted to not honor the elections results, and then it led to a very repressive attack on in East Pakistan, and it led to the separate formation of the country we know as Bangladesh, which seems to be prospering because they are not focusing as much on social issues as on development issues. They have been focused much more on economic issues in the last few years, and the results show. So I want to really make some very discrete points, and then I hope we can have some conversation. I don't want you to see this as a lecture that I give and you take away something. I hope I can also learn something from conversations. The fact is that partition was one of the most tragic events in world history. 1 million people killed, 10 million people rendered homeless. And the violence on all sides, the madness was on all sides. So I want to pivot here. I'm sitting in London, and it would not be possible for me to ignore the role that was played by the British, because once it became clear to the British rulers that they will not be able to hang around for very long, I don't think they cared at all what happened to us. And so there is a poem that should be taught more often in India than it is. And it's a poem by well-known poet W.H. Auden. And it's simply called Partition. And of course, he doesn't mention the name, but he's talking about Cyril Radcliffe. And I'm just going to read you just a few lines. Unbiased, at least he was when he arrived on his mission. Having never set eyes on the land he was called to partition between two peoples, phonetically at odds with their different diets and incomplete cards, etc. And then it goes on to say, he got down to work to the task of settling the fate of millions. The maps at his disposal were out of date, and the census returns almost certainly incorrect. But there was no time to check them, no time to inspect contested areas. The weather was frightfully hot, and a bout of dysentery kept him constantly on the trot. But in 7 weeks, it was done. The frontiers decided, a continent for better or worse divided. The next day he sailed for England, where he could quickly forget the case, as a good lawyer must. Return he would not, afraid, as he told his club that he might get shot. Now, there was a British journalist named Christopher Hitchens, who lived most of his life in the States. He was known for being an atheist. He has an article where he says that wherever the British went, they left those places divided. So he talks about Cyprus, he talks about Palestine and Israel, he talks about Iraq and Kuwait, he talks about Northern Ireland, Somalia, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. And he also references the Auden poem that I just quoted from. And he says, in the absence of such ambitions as a resolve to complete and not make such high-tone claims for themselves, because the British attributed to themselves some high moral goals. He says, and I'm quoting, the British would have done better to stay on their fog-girt island and not make such high-toned claims for themselves. The peoples of India would have found their own way without tutelage and on a different timetable. So that's enough of what the British did. We, in view of my synopsis and Dr. Harpreet Kaur's remark, I think we should also look at what we have done. That's very important. And I believe Professor Alok Bhalla is in the audience. He's a great friend, and he's an honored colleague, and he's one of the best scholars on partition studies. And he has done a tremendous amount of work on Intezar Hussain, who was a Shia writer who lived to be in his 90s, passed away only a few years ago. He was shortlisted for the Booker Prize just a couple of years before he passed away. And in an interview with him, where, among other things, Intezar Hussain says that I am a Muslim, but a Hindu sits inside me. He was trying to tell his Pakistani compatriots that instead of moving towards a Wahhabi identity that is associated with particular kinds of madrasa itself should be a pretty harmless word. It just means a school. Talib means student, but when we say Taliban, it acquires a different meaning. But in the middle of that interview, Dr. Alok Bhalla speaks to us in his own voice, almost like a breach, as if in a modest proposal by Jonathan Swift. He comes out in human terms, in direct terms. And this is what he says. And this is what I want to kind of pivot towards now. As post-colonials, we blame the British. I just did that. As Pakistanis, we blame the Indians. As Hindus, we assert that it's the Muslims who started it all. But we never look at ourselves and say that we, each of us, contributed to the nightmare that our lives have become since 1947. till we can do that, we shall never be able to bury the dead or find ways of living within a peaceful civilization. And that's what I tried to focus on in my synopsis. What happened in 1947 was tragic. For some people, it may also be totally wrong. But the fact is that there is no possibility, there is no need for us to return to the idea of Akhand Bharat, right? Where what is now Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh would once again become part of a huge India. That sounds very impressive, but also it's fanciful. The fact is that in the current India, the population of the largest minority, religious minority, of course there are non-religious minorities in India too, is about 14%. If you went to the idea of Akhand Bharat, which is an obsession with a few people, then the percentage of Muslims in that combined population will be between 35 and 40%. So I don't have to explain to you that people who are having difficulty with a 14% Muslim minority population, how they would handle a minority population of 35 to 40%, and the possibility that a 35 to 40% minority population will have a much bigger role in what we do in that. So let's keep that. Along those lines, the idea of what some of you call post-memory, I'm not too fond of all these post prefixes. In fact, that was my talk at Lahore at the Foreman Christian College. We very easily get to the ideas of post. Obama got elected as president, and people started singing the songs of post-racial America. We talk about postmodernism. There are a lot of holes in that particular narrative of modernism and postmodernism. Modernism happened for Europeans, for British and the Irish and the Americans in the 1920s. Modernism happened for some of us in India, or someone like Richard Wright, who is responsible for my getting into African American literature around 1970, in the 30s, in the 40s. Just think about our three major writers, Mulk Rajanand, R.K. Narayan, and Raja Rao. They all started publishing around 1938. And I don't have the time to go into, they were doing amazing things. For example, Raja Rao's preface to Kantapura, where he makes claims about Indian uses of Indian language long before Chenya Achebe makes that claim. After he publishes Things Fall Apart. And Richard Wright is doing modernist things. He's not always a postmodernist. So anyway, post-memory, I would like to call it, really in simple terms, distortion of memory. So what we have done on both sides of the border is to just remember the most negative memories. I mean, I've done 3 interviews on partition for 1946 partition archives. And in 2 of those 3, I start with a story of my own family. I was born in Rawalpindi in 1945. So I give away how ancient I am for some of you. But we were helped by a Muslim family, a well-known Muslim family in Rawalpindi, Hakim Amir Ali. And he warned my father that terrible violence was coming into Rawalpindi in March. So we were given the warning in February 47. And my father informed other members of the family. And in our family, because of what Hakim Amir Ali did, there was not a single life lost.
Oh, wow.
My mother-in-law, who was a Punjabi Hindu, she used to talk about a particular police inspector in Jhelum who made the Muslims in the area take an oath on the Quran, Holy Quran, that they would not indulge in any killing. And he was able to get his the people in that area to keep to that promise. And in addition to that, they collected Guru Granth Sahib from all the gurdwaras in a 10-mile, 20-mile radius, and took them respectfully in a truck and deposited them at Darbar Sahib, Amritsar. So we have really, since 1947, focused on stories of, as Dr. Bhalla said, we are so insistent and we are such skilled at this blame game that unless we move away from this blame game, we do not have the possibility of living peacefully within our country than between our countries. So this is what Wazira Zamindar, we published that book that Manisha mentioned, and it's available in India from Orient Black Swan and Amazon and Flipkart. In the introduction, we tried to pivot the idea of the long partition, which is exactly what Urvashi is doing, which is what Wazira said, that this seems to be an unending partition. We don't want to give up on these narratives. For example, I'll give you, because this is where I'm like to be. I will constantly hear from Hindu and Sikh friends what the Muslims did on the other side of the border that was going to be recognized as the border between what is now Pakistan and what is now India. So, and they will say, oh, all these massacres, all these horrible killings have took place. And I always remind people that they should consider the idea why there are so few Muslims between Delhi and Amritsar, Delhi and Chandigarh, Delhi and Ambala, Delhi and Shimla. Have any of you thought about why that is the case? Just think about that. Why is it? Of course, in the larger Punjab, Muslims were more than 2/3 majority. Hindus were only about 22, 23%, and then the rest of them are Sikhs. On the eastern side, what is now Punjab now, and what is Punjab and Haryana and parts of Himachal, the Muslims were probably not the majority. They were a much bigger majority in West Punjab that went to Pakistan. But the fact is that there were millions of Hindus, Muslims living between Delhi and Amritsar, Delhi and Shimla, Delhi and Chandigarh, whatever the destination you choose, Delhi and Patiala. What happened to them? Why don't we see Muslims in those areas? Because they got the same kind of message that families like ours, Hindus and Sikhs, got on the west side of the border. Either you leave, or you convert, or you face mass killings. They also were forced to leave. So let's acknowledge that the madness was not a one-way street. It was happening in all directions. So here's the point that I want to stop, and then I do want to mention the two writers, because otherwise you will dismiss me from the literature club of the Delhi University if I don't talk a little bit about the two authors I mentioned. So we need to move towards rituals, ceremonies of healing. We did not do truth and reconciliation as South Africa did after apartheid was abolished around 1990. Desmond Tutu headed that commission. And when the serious crimes were punished, but most of the time people were allowed to come in and get their guilt off their chest. We should create partitions. I know there are at least two partition museums, one in Amritsar and one in Calcutta. I have not visited either one of them yet. I don't know what the quality is, because even partition museum can be given various kinds of narratives, and some of those narratives are not particularly helpful. So what happened to us did not happen just in 1947. It did not just happen in 1971. It did not happen just in 1984. It is happening in a much more intense fashion today. This divisiveness, this trolling of each other, are particularly directed in one particular direction, has become a major part of our political culture. And it's just unbelievable, it's just incredible that people would be falling for that kind of narrative after what they have seen in 1971, what they have seen in 1984, what they have seen in 1992 after the Babri Masjid episode. So there is the memories, but there are the instigated memories. From 1947, if you look at the large range of interviews that the 1947 partition archives, there's a lot of nostalgia, there's a lot of good feeling. There is a desire to reconnect, as Principal Harpreet Kaur said, when we meet people to people, and this was my second visit to Pakistan. It's just amazing the love and affection you get. I was in Lahore for 15 days. Every day was more interesting than the previous day, culturally, intellectually, and in human interaction. People do not know, we think of Pakistan throughout the globe as a country associated with violence and the Taliban, and the fact that Osama bin Laden was living there, and the powers in Pakistan were hiding him, etc., etc. The love of Pakistanis for literature, for comedy, for poetry, for theater, for intellectual life. I went just a few days ago to an amazing classical and semi-classical music program. It's been going on since 1959, non-stop. So we still have a population in our own country which is willing to be trolled and misdirected by certain narratives that are being created in order to win election. Let's be honest. It's nothing to do with 47. It has to do with what is going on now. The two writers, what struck me in thinking about Bhisham Sani, as you would recall, in Thomas, in the novel, he creates a very rich and frightening picture of the violence. He also includes the efforts that were made to stem that violence. And you have episodes where young Sikh women, married and unmarried, they are jumping into the well, singing Gurbani in order to prevent the possibility of their being captured and raped and converted to Islam during that period. There is the film version, which was a TV serial. Om Puri was in the role of Nathu. That's the opening scene. Someone has asked him to kill a pig, and it's the person who asked him to kill a pig is kind of ambiguous in the narrative, but it leads to riots. So obviously it was something orchestrated, something planned. And then of course you have the serial was done by Gobind Adani. And let's not forget that people tried to stop the play of that serial on TV. And within a couple of days, a judge dismissed the case. He said, I don't see anything. What this screen version is doing is to show the difficulties, and it's not trying to instigate negative feelings about Hinduism. And the serial went on. I mean, I don't have to remind you of the rare possibility of such a decision coming from any court these days. On Intezar Hussain, I already mentioned that amazing quotation, but he's trying to, that also I mentioned, he wants the Pakistanis who are still in search of identity, national identity. It's a pretty, confused and difficult search, because it's becoming more and more difficult to hold on to the identity that started with Jinnah's demand for Pakistan and the beginning of a nation. And there've been all kinds of other perspectives, some of which are included in our book, Revisiting India's Partition. We made sure to include several Pakistani and Bangladesh scholars, and Tasneem Shahnaz and I wrote the essay on Intezar Hussain. So he wants Pakistani to remember that they are part of an ancient, civilization, that is the South Asian, the Indian civilization. And why don't they embrace it? Why don't they make it part of their identity, the part of their lives and their imaginations? So between Bhisham Sani, who was a leftist, who was a Marxist, and Intezar Hussain, who moved from UP to Pakistan side, he was very unhappy, tried to come back, things didn't work, but he continued to come very frequently. Dr. Bhalla met him many times, and Intezar Hussain had a dear friend who was, I believe, a professor of Sanskrit at DU, and they continued to have these conversations and dialogues. So I want to once again conclude with some thoughts, which is that it is time to resist this just atrocious gathering of negative memories. It is within our powers to change that. If we don't constantly, as Dr. Bhalla reminds us again and again, keep shifting blame to someone other than ourselves, right? If we don't stand in front of a mirror and say, we too are a part of the problem. Doesn't matter what your background in South Asia. I'm not talking only about India. And I'm saying that Bangladesh has recently, in recent, I think last 10 or 15 years, shown a remarkable ability to try to get past. We in India can follow that example. Our friends in Pakistan can follow that example. There are people in India, there are people in Pakistan who feel very frustrated because voices of reason, voices of some kind of, compromise, some kind of healing, they are not heard, they are lost. But we do not have any other option other than hope and other than faith in an idea of India that was created in our constitution in 1950 by Dr. Ambedkar. We need to say, as they say in the Black American community, keep our eyes on the prize. Keep our eyes on the prize. Let's keep looking at the possibility. Let's not worry about how long it takes. We may be in the middle of a second freedom movement. The freedom movement took 50 years or so if you begin with the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi in India, or it took another 70 years if you start with 1857, the first war of independence. So the war to the freedom fight to bring or retain and modify in good ways and positive ways where we move towards Martin Luther King's idea of the beloved community, where everyone is cherished. No one feels rejected. No one feels trashed. No one feels stigmatized just because somebody dresses in a particular way. Just because someone worships God in a particular way. Just because someone eats a particular kind of food. They should not be victimized. And that's the vision of India I hold on to, and I hope many of you in the audience do too. Thank you very much. I see some things have come in the chat box, Manisha. The chat box disappeared. Well, somebody was saying they can't hear.
I'm sorry. Sir. There are a couple of questions in the chat box, and there are a couple I have got here. There are a few of our students who would like to ask questions in Punjabi. So if you permit that.
I would permit that. I would support that, and I want questions first from the students.
All right. The students can please unmute. You please unmute yourselves and ask the questions, and then we will ask.
Yes. Could you please identify yourself? Oh. Gurdeep Kaur wants to ask a question.
That's right.
Okay, Gurdeep. I'm waiting for your question.
Yes, Gurdeep.
सत श्री अकाल सर, दिस साइड गुरदीप कौर।
हाँ
मेरा
जी,
क्वेश्चन
सत श्री अकाल जी।
है कि बंटवारे संबंधी ਸਾਹਿਤ ਦਾ ਸੱਚ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਵੀ ਸੱਚ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਵਿਦਵਾਨ ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਸੱਚਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਵਨ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ?
ਦੋਵੇਂ ਕੀ?
ਸਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਵੇਂ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਸੱਚਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਵਨ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ?
ਮੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਸੱਚ ਹੈ, ਮੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਦੋ ਸੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ।
ਸਰ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਜੋ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਦਾ ਸੱਚ ਬਟਵਾਰੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦਾ ਜੋ ਸੱਚ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਹੁਣ ਦਾ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਦੀ ਸੱਚ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਰ ਹੈ।
ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੋ ਬਟਵਾਰੇ ਚ ਹੋਇਆ, ਜੋ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡਾ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਹੋਇਆ, ਉਹੀਓ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਫੇਰ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਕੋਈ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ। ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜ਼ਮੀਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਇਹ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਹੈ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਰ ਵਕਤ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹੋਗੇ, ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਰਹੋਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗਲਤ ਕਹਾਣੀਆਂ ਸੁਣਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਰਹੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਰਾ ਕਸੂਰ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਦਾ, ਜੋ ਹਿੰਦੂਆਂ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਕੋਈ ਘੱਟ ਥੋੜਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹੀ ਕਤਲੇਆਮ ਕੀਤਾ। That's what I'm trying to remind you. It was a madness all around. We all need forgiveness from Waheguru. We all need to beg forgiveness from each other. So if we did not do it, here's the point, Manisha, actually I forgot to mention. I have it mentioned in my synopsis. And I'm, Gurdeep, don't mind, I'm going to switch to English. But your English is very good, I know that. So I have a speculation, which is a scholarly speculation, and I have not yet discovered the evidence to support it. My feeling is that there is no way Nehru would not have known in 1948, 1949, 1950, the need for truth and reconciliation. Maybe we didn't have the concept called truth and reconciliation. Yeah, but I think what Sardar Patel and Nehru, who worked more closely than some people want us to believe. Some people think that, well, that Patel statue manufactured in China, right? And that he was some kind of a Hindu-centered nation. Maybe he was slightly more in that direction than Nehru was. Nehru was a total, atheist, secular, agnostic kind of secularism. But I think they, as leaders, they worked very closely. They had a lot of respect for each other. So I have wondered, Manisha and Gurdeep and any others in the audience who have given thought to this, Why didn't they do that? I think they figured that the time was for nation building. To see industries establish karo, to see IITs establish karo, to see BHEL establish karo. All the things which are just now disappearing. And if some of them have not disappeared, there's a fear that they will disappear over the next 10, 20 years. So they thought that by focusing on nation building, they could allow people to forget what happened in 1947. In terms of how the memories are being manipulated today, I think they made a mistake. Because they should have done, but I'm at the same time, I'm saying it's still not too late. Look at what is happening in the Kartarpur corridor. I mean, to begin with, thousands of people were going every day. Now I went there. I was there on October 29th. There were only 100 or 120 people from Indian side. On weekends, I understand the number goes up to 400, 500. People meet there. They hug each other. They tell stories about their family's life. Poets are doing shairi, especially Punjabi poets. Those are the kinds of things we need to amplify on both sides of the border. And we need to allow people to speak to each other. We should also do it on the eastern side. We should allow more Bangladeshi people come in and talk about these things, because they were very much participant of what happened. I hope that helps. Thank you, Gurdeep.
Dr. Sandhu, please ask your question. I'm again muted.
Yeah, Manisha, more student questions. I would love more student questions.
Faculty, okay.
Sure. No. Please. I
Dr.
want to hear Dr. Sandhu.
Yeah.
Sat Sri Akal, sir.
Sat Sri Akal ji.
It's if you indulge me for a moment, I want to begin by saying that for me, it's a very overwhelming experience to, I'm a student of human behavior, to see a turbaned Sikh speak so eloquently with an inclination towards African-American literature. And because I believe in the value of icons, and I believe in the value of what icons can do to our youngsters. So my kudos for that. I have two questions. One is related to your work on partition and the other is not. My question with reference to partition is, you said that there were fissures earlier which enabled what happened to happen. But I wanted to know, I am a very student of very rudimentary, my knowledge of history is very rudimentary, grade 10, grade 11, not beyond that. What were those fissures that you hinted at with respect to partition?
Okay, I'll do that. What's the second question?
My second question is that literature is not my area, but as an individual, I've always been fascinated with African-American literature. I'm largely, though poorly, but self-educated in that. And I wanted to understand your personal journey as an absolute other into the foray of African-American literature, and did your own minority identity as a Sikh play a role in your understanding of that literature and your being a part of that? If so, how?
That, Dr. Sandhu, I love both your questions. I love your second question even more than the first one. I can tell you, I've given talks on that. I've given 40-minute talks on how I came into Black Studies, but I'll be very brief. I'm a Delhi University person. I'm a Delhi DU wala. I started teaching at Kirodimal College in 1965, when most of the people in this audience were not born yet.
No, sir, I was 2 years old. In my defense.
You are an exception.
Yes, in my defense.
I was not yet 21 when I started teaching there, and then 3 years later I went to NYU. I was registered at DU to do my PhD on Hemingway. So when I arrived in an American literature class, the classes used to be large because a lot of high school teachers were taking classes in order to finish their masters. because the city system had given them a promise that their salaries will be significantly increased if they finish the masters. The teacher brought a list of 100 novelists, and he said, don't just pick one, try to pick at least 3, because the one you want may be taken by someone else, right? And the names were in alphabetical order. Khalse da naam Singh hai, Amritjit Singh. So my name was towards the end of the alphabet. I chose Richard Wright, I chose Upton Sinclair, I chose Central Louis. It's very clear where my inclination was. I'm going towards muckrakers, I'm going towards naturalistic writers who expose the bad side of society, right? Somebody can come to Delhi and you can show them Connaught Place, but you can also show them some very dungeon-like places in Delhi that exist. So these novelists tended to show the negative sides of life. So I was hoping that I get Richard Wright, because we didn't have Google. These young people in the audience are so fortunate. I had to go and just look up encyclopedias, right? So anyway, to jump to where you want me to be, so I read Richard Wright's Native Son, which was published in 1940. I recommend it to all of you. It's a tough book to read. And I decided that I don't want to work anymore on Hemingway. And it was not because the character had anything to do with me. I grew up in Ambala Cantonment. My father was a college professor. He brought up 6 of us, 3 boys and 3 girls, with a lot of care and affection. We were never short of food or attention, all the good things of life. And this character there, Bigger Thomas, was a completely deprived. He was an angry young man who couldn't get any job and so on. Anyway, but that's the power of literature. That's the power of literature. Through emotion, through imagination, through language, a writer has the ability to bring you into his or her space, whether it's Toni Morrison's Beloved, Richard Wright's, or even Hemingway. It's not that I don't like Hemingway. I prefer William Faulkner if you are looking for some reading. So anyway, then I went to my director and he was surprised. He was very suspicious. Why is this foreigner wanting to work on Black studies, which was called Black studies then, and not African American studies yet. But he gave me some other topics. I looked at them and I came back. I said, Professor Gibson, I still want to work on Richard Wright. Then a Jewish friend of mine suggested that there are 3 books are coming on Richard Wright. Why don't you look at the Harlem Renaissance? So I did my PhD dissertation, you call it thesis, on the novels of the Harlem Renaissance. And that book is still in print. 48 years later, it's still selling 30, 40 copies a year. Not bad. I got about $50 royalty. Your question about did my being, I mentioned in the preface, Dr. Rajiv Verma has commented on it. He was my colleague at Sundri College in 1965. We started at Sundri College in the same week. And I said, I wonder if my interest in African American studies, Black studies at that time, had anything to do with my being a self-conscious turban Sikh. At that time, I was not sure. Today, I'm sure. And the answer is, it's not just the turban. It is what we carry inside our gray matter. I connect with Sikhism not through the Gurdwara as much, but through Sikhism's implication, involvement in search for justice and fairness for others. And so I think I was attracted to African American literature because of that. I did not know that at that time. Okay, your first question was about the fishers. What I mean is there's a book by Masood Raja, who is included in our book. He talks about the development of the Muslim identity. So I'm simplifying, but if you think of DAV schools, you have DAV College as part of Delhi University too. And you have DAV colleges in Haryana and Punjab all over. Right? Jalandhar is a huge one. There's a college in Delhi, the Arya colleges. So people influenced by Dayanand and people influenced by Sayyid Ahmad Khan in Aligarh. If you notice, Sayyid Ahmad Khan started a school there. That was a school, Islamia school. It was called Anglo-Islamic School. Just as you know what DAV means. It means Dayanand Anglo-Vedic School, Dayanand Anglo-Vedic College. Now, of course, along the way, things have changed and the original aims may have been lost. But these things are happening in the 19th century. So it's not a fissure in terms of divisiveness. Those may be more recent. But there was a conscious effort to create an Indian Muslim identity. I mean, one of the things we need to say, this whole monolithic condemnation of Muslims throughout the world. Indian Muslims are not like Muslims anywhere else in the world. A Muslim in Kerala is not like the Muslim in Meerut. They're all different. They're all different. So we need to respect the range of diversity within Muslim community. It's a large community, 200 million people. That's like 7 or 8 times the population of Canada. That is like 16 times the population of Australia. Now the Jews were, exterminated under Hitler. There are 6 million Jews. The numbers are not comparable. Any notions that we can somehow export them, any idea that we can give them second class, third class citizen permanently, these are foolish ideas. The sooner we give them on that. So there is a long history of developing a discrete Indian Muslim identity. And every now and then you will hear that, as we do in the Sikh community, right? There's a whole range of opinions, right? On many issues. Anandpur resolution was one of the good things. It was not given much attention by Mrs. Gandhi. Right? Federalism is not a bad idea for a country like India. So I hope I answered both your questions somewhat satisfactorily. I hope there are some other questions. Thank you.
I'm afraid, sir, we have one last question.
Sure.
Yeah. This is another student of ours.
Yeah.
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਸਰ
ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਸਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਜਸਮੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਹੈ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਸਰ 1947 ਦਾ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਉਜਾੜਾ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡਾ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ
ਹਾਂਜੀ।
ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਦੰਗਿਆਂ ਫਸਾਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਬਟਵਾਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਦੰਗੇ ਫਸਾਦ ਹੋਏ ਐਸਾ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਸੱਚ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਖੂਨ ਖਰਾਬਾ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੰਡਿਆ ਟੁੱਟਿਆ ਗਿਆ
That's a very good question, Bache. I don't know whether the answer can be put in those terms. कि भाई दंगे पहला होए या बंटवारा पहला होया. बंटवारा पहला होया actually, क्योंकि the decision to divide the country had taken place. As I said at the beginning of my talk, मैं किया ना, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਲੈਣਾ? ਉਹ ਗੋਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਉਛਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਰੀ ਫॉर माय लैंग्वेज ਉਹ ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਨਜ਼ਲਾ ਗਿਰਨਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪਰਵਾਹ ਨਹੀਂ they did the same thing in Ghana, they did the same thing everywhere. In fact, Nehru was very smart. He did not allow them to maintain economic institutions, control economic. We don't give enough credit to Nehru sometimes. And I don't like Nehru because he creates a lot of problems for our current administration. That's a constant claim. I'm just joking, that Nehru did this and that, and that's why this is happening. Nehru did not do anything to harm the possibility that the current administration can do better than they are doing. But to go back to your question, and we have limited time now, once it was decided, imagine, my family had lived in district Gujarat near Khariyan, which is now a big district and a big cantonment in Pakistan, for centuries. I don't even know how long. And we were not always sick. I think we are sick at least going back 5-6 generations. And Dr. Sandhu's compliment is well taken. I have spent more than 50 years in the United States with my turban. I have not had any problem. As Manisha said, I've been a distinguished professor at Ohio for almost 15 years. So
Matter of
ਜਵਾਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹੀ ਕਿ ਬਟਵਾਰਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਫਾਦਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਦਾਦੀ ਕੋਲ ਗਏ ਤਾਂ ਦਾਦੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਐਵੇਂ ਪਾਗਲ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਤੂੰ, ਇਹ ਤੇ ਫਸਾਦ ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਾਂ, ਇਸ ਵਾਰੀ ਪੱਕਾ ਹੈ, ਤੈਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਾ ਪਏਗਾ। ਉਹਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਦੀਵਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗਹਿਰੇ ਛੁਪਾਏ ਹੋਏ ਸਨ, ਕੈਸ਼ ਛੁਪਾਇਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ, ਲੋਕੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀਵਾਰਾਂ 'ਚ ਸੀਲ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸਨ। ਔਰ she didn't tell. Later on, she suffered mental illness. She lived to be 95. So that makes it so painful. Yes, I'm now giving you a more categorical answer. The Patwara came first. The Patwara was absolutely not essential. Or if it had to be done, it could have been done over a longer period of time. Nehru and the British should have supplied more army to control the moving of people, populations, huge populations, unbelievably large populations. That was not happened. But and this is my concluding, and Manisha, you will give me a chance to read a poem, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but this is all done. We need to move on, getting past that. We need to heal the wounds. You are part of that generation that will heal the wound. So what I want to do is thank you all for listening. And I have a poem that may not seem connected to this theme, but it is. It is a poem by Langston Hughes. I'm named Langston Hughes, and I sometimes joke that I'm required to do that. Which you know I'm not, but I like to do that. All right, so here's the poem. Actually, I have a version on a piece of paper too, which is more correct. All right. So these identities, when you are trying to really control the identity of a large population, like 200 million Muslims or 40 million Christians or Sikhs or any other group in India or in any part of the world. So this poem speaks to that. He says, I too sing America. Why does he say I too sing America? Those of you who are in literature, you know Walt Whitman sang America. So he's saying, a white old man sang America. I too, a black man, young black man, sing America. I'm the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too in America. But what I'm going to do even more for you, and I hope you will like it. I have a translation by a poet whose name is K.K. Rishi, the Punjabi. He is a retired professor of biology from Kurukshetra University. But he's a very good poet in Hindi and Urdu, and he has translated some English poems, including Emily Dickinson and Tagore and so on. So this is his translation of the Langston Hughes poem, and I think it's beautiful. Manisha, I think the translation is sometimes more beautiful than the original.
Yes, absolutely.
मैं भी अमेरिका के नगमे गाता हूँ, काले तन का भाई मैं कहलाता हूँ। मैं भी इंडिया के नगमे गाता हूँ, मुस्लिम फेथ का भाई मैं कहलाता हूँ। घर में जब मेहमान कहीं से आते हैं, घर वाले तब मुझको यूं समझाते हैं, देखो मेज के पास नहीं तुम आओगे, आज रसोई में ही खाना खाओगे। उनकी बात पे मैं मन ही मन मुस्काता हूँ, किचन के अंदर डटकर खाना खाता हूँ। आई लव दिस लाइन। किचन के अंदर डटकर खाना खाता हूँ, खाना खाकर यूं तगड़ा हो जाऊंगा, डील डोल पर अपने मैं इतराऊंगा, देखूंगा फिर कौन मुझे समझाता है, मेहमानों के बीच से कौन उठाता है, रुख पर मेरे जब रौनक लहराएगी। I can identify with it. I'm wearing a beautiful turban. खूबसूरती मेरी उनको भाएगी, उनको अपनी बातों पर शर्म आएगी। मैं भी अमेरिकन हूँ, उन्हें बताता हूँ, मैं भी अमेरिका के नगमे गाता हूँ। Every Hindu child, every Dalit child, every female child, every Muslim child, every Parsi child, every Sikh child, every Christian child in India has the right to sing this song. Please sing with them. I love all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a beautiful lecture and what a beautiful way of ending this. And Langston Hughes is my favorite poet. And the translation is even more beautiful than the original, as you said. And there are so many questions, but I'm afraid, sir, we are totally.
Listen, you can send them to by my email.
I'll do that. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
just the best ones, put them in one, and I'll send it. If you know who especially the students, you can give the answers back to them. I'll be happy to write back. I'm sorry, because of time difference and travel, I've not been able to participate in other sessions of the conference. I'm already getting text messages and emails from people who are in the attendance, and they are saying beautiful things about all of you.
It's a lovely,
you
it has
so
been
much.
lovely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much, sir.
Wonderful. Sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
as you said, we need to move on. We need to move away. India and Pakistan have a shared culture, and we have to look at that.
And develop our own critical thinking, not believe anything we are told,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
stand up and speak for ourselves.
Yes.
Look at the movie Battle of Algeria. One day we may have to all march in the streets. There is a
Exactly.
march going on. I'm not a supporter of any particular political party, but the power is in the hands of the people.
Always.
Thank you so much, sir. The chat box is it is brimming with so much appreciation.
I'm going to look. I'm not. You can go. You probably are busy.
Yeah.
I'll look at what is in the chat box
So,
before I leave.
So thank you, sir. Again, I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude,
Yeah.
and we hope to see you in person sometimes.
Well, I was in Delhi University for a whole year. Mata Sundri College never contacted me.
Oh, our loss, sir.
Ruby Kapoor is someone I've known for a while.
Yeah.
She retired now.
Yes, she's retired.
Next time I'm in Delhi, I want to meet some of you in person.
Absolutely.
Please, sir. We'd be honored.
We'd honored. Yes, and I would also like to thank Dr. Nidhi Malhotra, the session coordinator, and
thanks,
Ms.
Nidhi.
Sangeeta Pathak and Ms. Gurpreet for technical support. So we'll take your leave, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Dr. Sandhu for our good questions, and thanks to Dr. Harpreet Kaur for our introductory remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Leave.